The Iron Wolf. There was once upon a time a parson who had a servant, and when the servant had served him faithfully for 12 years and upward, he came to the parson and said, "Let us now settle our accounts, master, and pay me what thou owest me. I have now served long enough, and would fain have a little place in the wide world all to myself to good." Said the parson, "I'll tell thee now what wage I'll give thee for thy faithful service. I'll give thee this egg, take it home, and when thou gettest there, make to thyself a cattle pen, and make it strong. Then break the egg in the middle of thy cattle pen, and thou shalt see something. But whatever thou doest, don't break it on thy way home, or all thy luck will leave thee." So the servant departed on his homeward way. He went on, and at last he thought to himself, "Come now, I'll see what is inside this egg of mine." So he broke it, and out of it came all sorts of cattle in such numbers that the open steppe became like a fair. The servant stood there in amazement, and he thought to himself, "However in God's world shall I be able to drive all these cattle back again?" He had scarcely uttered the words when the Iron Wolf came running up, and said to him, "I'll collect and drive back all these cattle into the egg again, and I'll patch the egg up so that it will become quite whole, but in return for that," continued the Iron Wolf, "whenever thou dost sit down on the bridal bench, I'll come and eat thee." Well, thought the servant to himself, "A lot of things may happen before I sit down on the bridal bench and he comes to eat me, and in the meantime I shall get all these cattle." "Agreed, then," said he. So the Iron Wolf immediately collected all the cattle and drove them back into the egg, and patched up the egg and made it whole just as it was before. The servant went home to the village where he lived, made him a cattle pen stronger than strong, went inside it and broke the egg, and immediately that cattle pen was as full of cattle as it could hold. Then he took to farming and cattle breeding, and he became so rich that in the whole wide world there was none richer than he. He kept to himself, and his goods increased and multiplied exceedingly. The only thing wanting to his happiness was a wife, but a wife he was afraid to take. Now near to where he lived was a general who had a lovely daughter, and this daughter fell in love with the rich man. So the general went and said to him, "Come, why don't you marry? I'll give you my daughter and lots of money with her." "How is it possible for me to marry?" replied the man. "As soon as ever I sit down on the bridal bench, the Iron Wolf will come and eat me up." And he told the general all that had happened. "Oh, nonsense," said the general. "Don't be afraid. I have a mighty host, and when the time comes for you to sit down on the bridal bench, we'll surround your house with 3 strong rows of soldiers, and they won't let the Iron Wolf get at you, I can tell you." So they talked the matter over till he let himself be persuaded, and then they began to make great preparations for the bridal banquet. Everything went off excellently well, and they made merry till the time came when bride and bridegroom were to sit down together on the bridal bench. Then the general placed his men in 3 strong rows all round the house so as not to let the Iron Wolf get in, and no sooner had the young people sat down upon the bridal bench than, sure enough, the Iron Wolf came running up. He saw the host standing round the house in 3 strong rows, but through all 3 rows he leaped and made straight for the house. But the man, as soon as he saw the Iron Wolf, leaped out of the window, mounted his horse, and galloped off with the wolf after him. Away and away he galloped, and after him came the wolf, but try as it would, it could not catch him up anyhow. At last, toward evening, the man stopped and looked about him, and saw that he was in a lone forest, and before him stood a hut. He went up to this hut, and saw an old man and an old woman sitting in front of it, and said to them, "Would you let me rest a little while with you, good people?" "By all means," said they. "There is one thing, however, good people," said he. "Don't let the Iron Wolf catch me while I am resting with you." "I have no fear of that," replied the old couple. "We have a dog called Chutko, who can hear a wolf coming a mile off, and he'll be sure to let us know." So he laid him down to sleep, and was just dropping off when Chutko began to bark. Then the old people awoke him and said, be off, for the Iron Wolf is coming." and they gave him the dog, and a wheaten hearth cake as provision by the way. So he went on, and the dog followed after him till it began to grow dark, and then he perceived another hut in another forest. He went up to that hut, and in front of it were sitting an old man and an old woman. He asked them for a night's lodging. "Only," said he, "take care that the iron wolf doesn't catch me." "Have no fear of that," said they. "We have a dog here called Vasco, who can hear a wolf 9 miles off." So he laid him down and slept. Just before dawn, Vasco began to bark. Immediately they awoke him. "Run," cried they, "the iron wolf is coming." And they gave him the dog, and a barley hearth cake as provision by the way. So he took the hearth cake, sat him on his horse, and off he went, and his 2 dogs followed after him. He went on and on. On and on he went till evening, when again he stopped and looked about him, and he saw that he was in another forest, and another little hut stood before him. He went into the hut, and there were sitting an old man and an old woman. "Will you let me pass the night here, good people?" said he. "Only take care that the iron wolf does not get hold of me." "Have no fear," said they. "We have a dog called Berry, who can hear a wolf coming 12 miles off. He'll let us know." So he lay down to sleep, and early in the morning Berry let them know that the iron wolf was drawing nigh. Immediately they awoke him. "'Tis high time for you to be off," said they. Then they gave him the dog, and a buckwheat hearth cake as provision by the way. He took the hearth cake, sat him on his horse, and off he went. So now he had 3 dogs, and they all 3 followed him. He went on, and toward evening he found himself in front of another hut. He went into it, and there was nobody there. He went and lay down, and his dogs lay down also. Trapko on the threshold of the room door, Vasco at the threshold of the house door, and Berry at the threshold of the outer gate. Presently the iron wolf came trotting up. Immediately Chatko gave the alarm. Vasco nailed him to the earth, and Berry tore him to pieces. Then the man gathered his faithful dogs around him, mounted his horse, and went back to his own home. The 3 brothers. There were once upon a time 3 brothers, and the 3rd was a fool. And in their little garden grew golden apple trees with golden apples, and not far off lived a hog that had taken a fancy to these apples. So the father sent his sons into the garden to guard the trees. The eldest went first, and sat and watched till he was tired of watching, and fell asleep. Then the hog crept in, and dug till he had digged up an apple tree, which he ate up, and then went his way. The father got up next morning and counted his apple trees, and one of them was gone. The next night the father sent the 2nd son to watch. He waited and watched till he also fell asleep, and the hog came again and dug up and ate another golden apple tree and made off. The next morning the father got up again and counted his trees, and another was gone. Then the fool said, "Dad, let me go too." But the father said, "O fool, fool, wherefore shouldst thou go? Thy wise brethren have watched to no purpose. What canst thou do?" "Hoity-toity," said the fool, "give me a gun, and I'll go all the same." His father wouldn't give him a gun, so he took it and went to watch. He placed his gun across his knees and sat down. He sat and sat, but nothing came. He got drowsy, was nodding off, when his gun fell off his knees, and he awoke with a start and watched more warily. At last he heard something, and there stood the hog. It began to dig up another tree, when he pulled the trigger and bang. His brothers heard the sound, came running up, were quite amazed to see a dead boar lying there, and said, "What will become of us now?" "They let us kill him," said the eldest brother, "and bury him in that ditch, and say that we killed the hog." So they took and slew him, and buried him in the ditch, and took the hog to their father, and said, "While we were watching, this hog came up and began digging. So we killed him and have brought him to you." One day a nobleman came by that way, and was surprised to see a beautiful elder bush growing out of the ditch, so he went up to it, cut off a branch, made him a flute out of it, and began playing upon it. But the flute played of its own accord, and made this moan, "Play, good master, play, but steal not my heart away. Me my brothers took and slew, in the ditch my body threw, for that hog shot down by me, that rooted up the tree." The nobleman then went on to the inn, and there he found the fool's father. "Such a funny thing has happened to me," said the nobleman. "I went and cut me out a flute from an elder bush, and lo, it plays of its own accord." Then the father took the flute and tried his hand at it, and it sang, "Play, good daddy, play, but don't steal my heart away. Me my brothers took and slew, in the ditch my body threw, for that hog shot down by me, that rooted up the tree." The father was so astonished that he bought it, and took it home, and gave it to the mother for her to play upon it, and it sang, "Play, good mammy, play, but don't steal my heart away. Me my brothers took and slew, in the ditch my body threw, for that hog shot down by me, that rooted up the tree." Then the father gave the flute to his brothers to play upon, but they wouldn't. "Nay, but you must," said their father. Then the younger brother took and played upon it. "Play, my brother, play, but don't steal my heart away. Me my brothers took and slew, in the ditch my body threw, for the hog shot down by me, that rooted up the tree." Then the father gave the flute to the elder brother who had slain him, but he wouldn't take it. "Take it and play upon it," roared his father at him. Then he took it and played. "Play, my brother, play, but don't steal my heart away. 'Twas thou who didst me slay, and stowed my corpse away, for the hog shot down by me, that rooted up the tree." "Then it was thou who didst slay him," cried the father. What could the elder brother do but confess it? Then they dug the dead man up, and buried him in the cemetery, but they tied the elder brother to a wild horse, which scattered his bones about the endless steppe. But I was there, and drank wine and mead till my beard was wet. The Tsar and the angel. Somewhere, nowhere, in a certain kingdom, in a certain empire, time out of mind, and in no land of ours, dwelt a Tsar who was so proud, so very proud, that he feared neither God nor man. He listened to no good counsel from whithersoever it might come, but did only that which was good in his own eyes, and nobody durst put him right. And all his ministers and nobles grieved exceedingly, and all the people grieved likewise. One day the Tsar went to church. The priest was reading from Holy Scripture, and so he needs must listen. Now there were certain words there which pleased him not. To say such words to me, thought he, words that I can never forget, though I grow grey-headed. After service the Tsar went home, and bade them send the priest to him. The priest came. "How durst thou read such and such passages to me?" said the Tsar. "They were written to be read," replied the priest. "Written, indeed, and wouldst thou then read everything that is written, smear those places over with grease, and never dare to read them again? I say, 'tis not I who have written those words, your majesty," said the priest, "nor is it for such as I to smear them over. What thou dost presume to teach me? I am the Tsar, and it is thy duty to obey me. In all things will I obey thee, O Tsar, save only in sacred things. God is over them. Men cannot alter them. Do not alter them," roared the Tsar. "If I wish them altered, altered they must be. Strike me out those words instantly, I say, and never dare read them in church again. Dost hear?" "I dare not," said the priest. "I have no will in the matter. I command thee, fellow, I dare not, O Tsar." "Well," said the Tsar, "I'll give thee 3 days to think about it, and on the evening of the 4th day appear before me, and I'll strike thy head from thy shoulders if thou dost not obey me." Then the priest bowed low and went home. The 3rd day was already drawing to a close, and the priest knew not what to do. It was no great terror to him to die for the faith, but what would become of his wife and children? He walked about, and wept, and wrung his hands. Oh, woe is me, woe is me! At last he lay down on his bed, but sleep he could not. Only toward dawn did he doze off. Then he saw in a dream an angel standing at his head. "Fear nothing," said the angel. "God hath sent me down on earth to protect thee." So early in the morning, the priest rose up full of joy and prayed gratefully to God. The Tsar also awoke early in the morning and bawled to his huntsmen to gather together and go hunting with him in the forest. So away they went hunting in the forest, and it was not long before a stag leaped out of the thicket beneath the very eyes of the Tsar. Off after it went the Tsar. Every moment the stag seemed to be faltering, and yet the Tsar could never quite come up with it. Hot with excitement, the Tsar spurred his horse on yet faster. Gee up, he cried, now we've got him. But here a stream crossed the road, and the stag plunged into the water. The Tsar was a good swimmer. I've got him now, at any rate, thought he. A little longer, and I shall hold him by the horns. So the Tsar took off his clothes, and into the water he plunged after the stag. But the stag swam across to the opposite bank, and the Tsar was extending his hand to seize him by the horns when there was no longer any stag to be seen. It was the angel who had taken the form of a stag. The Tsar was amazed. He looked about him on every side and wondered where the stag had gone. Then he saw someone on the other side of the river putting on his clothes, and presently the man mounted his horse and galloped away. The Tsar thought it was some evildoer, but it was the self-same angel that had now put on the Tsar's clothes and gone away to collect the huntsmen and take them home. As for the Tsar, he remained all naked and solitary in the forest. At last he looked about him and saw far, far away, smoke rising above the forest, and something like a dark cloud standing in the clear sky. Maybe, thought he, that is my hunting pavilion. So he went in the direction of the smoke and came at last to a brick kiln. The brick burners came forth to meet him and were amazed to see a naked man. What is he doing here? They thought. And they saw that his feet were lame and bruised, and his body covered with scratches. "Give me to drink," said he, "and I would fain eat something also." The brick burners had pity on him. They gave him an old tattered garment to wear and a piece of black bread and a gherkin to eat. Never from the day of his birth had the Tsar had such a tasty meal. "And now speak, O man," said they. "Who art thou?" "I'll tell you who I am," said he, when he had eaten his fill. "I am your Tsar. Lead me to my capital, and there I will reward you." "What, thou wretched rogue," they cried, "thou dost presume to mock us, thou old ragamuffin, and magnify thyself into a Tsar, thou reward us, indeed." And they looked at him in amazement and scorn. "Dare to laugh at me again," said he, "and I'll have your heads chopped off." For he forgot himself and thought he was at home. What elf! Then they fell upon him and beat him. They beat him and hauled him about most mercifully, and then they drove him away, and off he went bellowing through the forest. He went on and until at last he saw once more a smoke rising up out of the wood. Again he thought, "That is surely my hunting pavilion," and so he went up to it. And toward evening he came to another brick kiln. There, too, they had pity upon and kindly entreated him. They gave him to eat and to drink. They also gave him ragged hose and a tattered shirt, for they were very poor people. They took him to be a runaway soldier, or some other poor man, but when he had eaten his fill and clothed himself, he said to them, "I am your Tsar." They laughed at him, and again he began to talk roughly to the people. Then they fell upon him and thrashed him soundly and drove him right away. And he wandered all by himself through the forest till it was night. Then he laid him down beneath a tree, and so he passed the night, and rising up very early, fared on his way straight before him. At last he came to a third brick kiln, but he did not tell the brick burners that he was the Tsar. All he thought of now was how he might reach his capital. The people here, too, treated him kindly, and seeing that his feet were lame and bruised, they had compassion upon him, and gave him a pair of very, very old boots. And he asked them, "Do you know by which way I can get to the capital?" They told him, but it was a long, long journey that would take the whole day. So he went the way they had told him, and he went on and on till he came to a little town, and there the roadside sentries stopped him. "Halt," they cried. He halted. "Your passport?" "I have none." "What? No passport? Then thou art a vagabond." "Seize him," they cried. So they seized him and put him in a dungeon. Shortly after they came to examine him, and asked him, "Whence art thou?" "From such and such a capital," said he. Then they ordered him to be put in irons and taken thither. So they took him back to the capital and put him in another dungeon. Then the custodians came round to examine the prisoners, and one said one thing and one said another, till at last it came to the turn of the Tsar. "Who art thou, old man?" they asked. Then he told them the whole truth. "Once I was the Tsar," said he, and he related all that had befallen him. Then they were much amazed, for he was not at all like a Tsar. For indeed he had been growing thin and haggard for a long time, and his beard was all long and tangled. And yet for all that he stood them out that he was the Tsar. So they made up their minds that he was crazy, and drove him away. "Why should we keep this fool forever?" said they, "and waste the Tsar's bread upon him?" So they let him go, and never did any man feel so wretched on God's earth as did that wretched Tsar. Willingly would he have done any sort of work if he had only known how, but he had never been used to work, so he had to go along begging his bread, and could scarce beg enough to keep body and soul together. He lay at night at the first place that came to hand, sometimes in the tall grass of the steppes, sometimes beneath a fence. That it should ever have come to this, she sighed. But the angel who had made himself Tsar went home with the huntsman, and no man knew that he was not a Tsar, but an angel. The same evening that priest came to him and said, "Do thy will, O Tsar, and strike off my head, for I cannot blot out one word of holy scripture." And the Tsar said to him, "Glory be to God, for now I know that there is at least one priest in my tsardom who stands firm for God's word. I'll make thee the highest bishop in this realm." The priest thanked him, bowed down to the earth, and departed marveling. "What is this wonder?" thought he, "that the haughty Tsar should have become so just and gentle." But all men marveled at the change that had come over the Tsar. He was now so mild and gracious, nor did he spend all his days in the forest, but went about inquiring of his people if any were wronged or injured by their neighbours, and if justice were done. He took count of all, and rebuked the unjust judges, and saw that every man had his rights. And the people now rejoiced as much as they had grieved heretofore, and justice was done in all the tribunals, and no bribes were taken. But the Tsar, the real Tsar, grew more and more wretched. Then, after 3 years, a ukase went forth that on such and such a day all the people were to come together to a great banquet given by the Tsar. All were to be there, both rich and poor, both high and lowly. And all the people came, and the unhappy Tsar came too. And so many long tables were set out in the Tsar's courtyard that all the people praised God when they saw the glad sight. And they all sat down at table and ate and drank, and the Tsar himself and his courtiers distributed the meat and drink to the guests as much as they would, but to the unfortunate Tsar they gave a double portion of everything. And they all ate and drank their fill, and then the Tsar began to inquire of the people whether any had suffered wrong or had not had justice done him. And when the people began to disperse, the Tsar stood at the gate with a bag of money, and gave to every one a grivna coin, but to the unhappy Tsar he gave 3. And after 3 years the Tsar gave another banquet, and again entertained all the people. And when he had given them both to eat and to drink as much as they would, he inquired of them what was being done in his tsardom. and again gave a grivna to each one of them. But to the unlucky Tsar he gave a double portion of meat and drink and 3 grivni. And again, after 3 years, he made yet another banquet, and proclaimed that all should come, both rich and poor, both earls and churls. And all the people came and ate and drank, and bowed low before the Tsar and thanked him, and made ready to depart. The unlucky Tsar was also on the point of going, when the angel Tsar stopped him, and took him aside into the palace, and said to him, Lo, God hath tried thee and chastised thy pride these 10 years. But me he sent to teach thee that Tsar must have regard to the complaints of his people, so thou wast made poor and a vagabond on the face of the earth, that thou mightst pick up wisdom, if but a little. Look now, that thou doest good to thy people, and judgest righteous judgment. As from henceforth thou shalt be Tsar again. But I must fly back to God in heaven. And when he had said this, he bade them wash and shave him, for his beard had grown right down to his girdle, and put upon him the raiment of a Tsar. And the angel said further, Go now into the inner apartments, there the courtiers of the Tsar are sitting and making merry, and none will recognize in thee the vagabond old man. May God help thee always to do good. And when the angel had said this, he was no more to be seen, and only his clothes remained on the floor. Then the Tsar prayed gratefully to God, and went to the merry making of his courtiers, and henceforth he ruled his people justly, as the angel had bidden him. The story of Ivan and the daughter of the sun. There were once upon a time 4 brethren, and 3 of them remained at home, while the 4th went out to seek for work. This youngest brother came to a strange land, and hired himself out to a husbandman for 3 gold pieces a year. For 3 years he served his master faithfully, so at the end of his time he departed with 9 gold pieces in his pocket. The first thing he now did was to go to a spring, and into the spring he threw 3 of his gold pieces. Let us see now, said he, if I have been honest, they will come swimming back to me. Then he lay down by the side of the spring and went fast asleep. How long he slept there, who can tell? But at any rate he woke up at last and went to the spring, but there was no sign of his money to be seen. Then he threw 3 more of the gold pieces into the spring, and again he lay down by the side of it and slept. Then he got up and went and looked into the spring, and still there was no sign of the money. So he threw in his 3 remaining gold pieces, and again lay down and slept. The 3rd time he arose and looked into the spring, and there, sure enough, was his money. All 9 of the gold pieces were floating on the surface of the water. And now his heart felt lighter, and he gathered up the 9 gold pieces and went on his way. On the road he fell in with 3 cats happy with a laden wagon. He asked them concerning their wares, and they said they were carrying a load of incense. He begged them straightway to sell him this incense. Then they sold it to him for the gold pieces, and when he had bought it and they had departed, he kindled fire and burnt the incense, and offered it up to God as a sweet-smelling sacrifice. Then an angel flew down to him and said, O, thou that hast offered this sweet-smelling sacrifice to God, what dost thou want for thine own self? Dost thou want at tsardom, or great riches, or, perchance, the desire of thy heart is a good wife? Speak, for God will give thee whatsoever thou desirest. When the man had listened to the angel, he said to him, Tarry a while, I will go and ask those people who are plowing yonder. Now those people who were plowing there were his own brethren, but he did not know that they were his brethren. So he went up and said to the elder brother, Tell me, uncle, what shall I ask of God, a tsardom, or great riches, or a good wife? Tell me, which of the 3 is the best gift to ask for? Then his eldest brother said to him, I know not, and who does know, go and ask someone else. So he went to the second brother, who was plowing a little farther on. He asked him the same question, but the man only shrugged his shoulders and said he didn't know either. Then he went to the 3rd brother, who was the youngest of the 3, and also plowing there. And he asked him, saying, Tell me, now, which is the best gift to ask of God, a tsardom, or great riches, or a good wife? And the third brother said, What a question! Thou art too young for tsardom, and great riches last but for a little while. Ask God for a good wife, for if it please God to give thee a good wife, 'tis a gift that will bless thee all thy life long. So he went back to the angel and asked for a good wife. Then he went on his way till he came to a certain wood, and, looking about him, he perceived that in this wood was a lake. And while he was looking at it, 3 wild doves came flying along and lit down upon this lake. They threw off their plumage and plunged into the water, and then he saw that they were not wild doves, but 3 fair ladies. They bathed in the lake, and in the meantime the youth crept up and took the raiment of one of them and hid it behind the bushes. When they came out of the water, the third lady missed her clothes. Then the youth said to her, I know where thy clothes are, but I will not give them to thee unless thou wilt be my wife. Good, cried she, thy wife will I be. Then she dressed herself, and they went together to the nearest village. When they got there, she said to him, Now go to the nobleman who owns the land here, and beg him for a place where we may build us a hut. So he went right up to the nobleman's castle and entered his reception room, and said, Glory be to God, for ever and ever, replied the nobleman. What dost thou want here, Ivan? I have come, sir, to beg of thee a place where I may build me a hut. The place for a hut, eh? Good, very good. Go home, and I'll speak to my overseer, and he shall appoint thee a place. So he returned from the nobleman's castle, and his wife said to him, Go now into the forest and cut down an oak, a young oak, that thou canst span round with both arms. So he cut down such an oak as his wife had told him of, and she built a hut of the oak, for the overseer had come and shown them a place where they might build their hut. But when the overseer returned home, he praised loudly to his master the wife of this Ivan. She is such and such, said he. Fair as she may be, replied the nobleman, but she is another's. She need not be another's for long, replied the overseer. This Ivan is in our hands. Let us send him to see why it is the sun grows so red when he sets. That's just the same as if you sent him to a place whence he can never return. All the better. Then they sent for Ivan, and gave him this errand, and he returned home to his wife, weeping bitterly. Then his wife asked him all about it, and said, Well, I can tell thee all about the ways of the sun, for I am the sun's own daughter. So now I'll tell thee the whole matter. Go back to this nobleman, and say to him that the reason why the sun turns so red as he sets is this: just as the sun is going down into the sea, 3 fair ladies rise out of it, and it is the sight of them which makes him turn so red all over. So he went back and told them. No ho, cried they. If you can go as far as that, you may now go a little farther. So they told him to go to hell and see how it was there. Yes, said his wife, I know the road that leads to hell also very well, but the nobleman must let his overseer go with thee, or else he never will believe that thou really didst go to hell. So the nobleman told his overseer that he must go to hell too. So they went together. And when they got there, the rulers of hell laid hands upon the overseer straightway. Thou dog, roared they, we've been looking out for thee for some time. So Ivan returned without the overseer, and the nobleman said to him, Where's my overseer? I left him in hell, said Ivan. And they said that they were waiting for you, sir, too. When the nobleman heard this, he hanged himself, but Ivan lived happily with his wife. The cat, the cock, and the fox. There was once upon a time a cat and a cock who agreed to live together. So they built them a hut on an ash heap, and the cock kept house while the cat went foraging for sausages. One day the fox came running up. I opened the door. Little cock, cried she. Pussy told me not to, little fox, said the cock. Open the door, little cock, repeated the fox. I tell you, pussy told me not to, little fox. At last, however, the cock grew tired of always saying no, so he opened the door, and in the fox rushed, seized him in her jaws, and ran off with him. Then the cock cried, Help, pussy, pussy, that foxy hussy has got me tight, with all her might, across her tail. my legs do trail along the bridge so stony. The cat heard it, gave chase to the fox, rescued the cock, brought him home, scolded him well, and said, "Now keep out of her jaws in the future, if you don't want to be killed altogether." Then the cat went out foraging for wheat, so that the cock might have something to eat. He had scarcely gone when the sly she-fox again came creeping up. "Dear little cock," said she, "pray open the door." "Nay, little fox," Pussy said, "I wasn't to." But the fox went on asking and asking till at last the cock let him in. Then the fox rushed at him, seized him by the neck, and ran off with him. Then the cock cried out, "Help, pussy, pussy, that foxy hussy has got me tight with all her might. Across her tail my legs do trail along the bridge so stony." The cat heard it, and again he ran after the fox and rescued the cock and gave the fox the sound drubbing. Then he said to the cock, "Now, mind you never let her come in again, or she'll eat you." But the next time the cat went out, the she-fox came again and said, "Dear little cock, open the door." "No, little fox," Pussy said, "I wasn't to." But the fox begged it and begged so piteously that at last the cock was quite touched and opened the door. Then the fox caught him by the throat again and ran away with him, and the cock cried, "Help, pussy, pussy, that foxy hussy has got me tight with all her might. Across her tail my legs do trail along the bridge so stony." The cat heard it and gave chase again. He ran and ran, but this time he couldn't catch the fox up. So he returned home and wept bitterly, because he was now all alone. At last, however, he dried his tears and got him a little fiddle bow, and a big sack, and went to the fox's hole and began to play. Fiddle-de-dee, the foxy so wee had daughters twice two, and a little son too, called Phil. Fiddle-dee, come foxy and see my sweet minstrelsy. Then the fox's daughter said, "Mammy, I'll go out and see who it is that is playing so nicely." So out she skipped, but no sooner did Pussy see her than he caught hold of her and popped her into his sack. Then he played again. Fiddle-de-dee, the foxy so wee had daughters twice two, and a little son too, called Phil. Fiddle-dee, come foxy and see my sweet minstrelsy. Then the second daughter skipped out, and Pussy caught her by the forehead and popped her into his sack, and went on playing and singing till he had got all four daughters into his sack, and the little son also. Then the old fox was left all alone, and she waited and waited, but not one of them came back. At last she said to herself, "I'll go out and call them home, for the cock is roasting, and the milk pottage is simmering, and 'tis high time we had something to eat." So out she popped, and the cat pounced upon her and killed her too. Then he went and drank up all the soup and gobbled up all the pottage, and then he saw the cock lying on a plate. "Come, shake yourself, cock," said Puss. So the cock shook himself and got up, and the cat took the cock home and the dead foxes too. And when they got home they skinned them to make nice beds to lie upon, and lived happily together in peace and plenty. And as they laughed over the joke as a good joke, we may laugh over it too.